Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the Wednesday Night Football Showdown slate for this evening / this afternoon over on Draftkings. And this is going to be a wild one because there is a ton of players missing, and this game is happening about a week after it was scheduled. It was originally on Thanksgiving night. Now we're all the way to Wednesday afternoon, so I'm not really sure what to expect, but it's football on a Wednesday, so that's going to be quite interesting. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well, so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And I usually say this for the end of the video, but since it's the beginning of the month, I will plug it now. If you want to support the channel over on Patreon, the link is down below for that. It's $10 a month, and you get access into my entire NFL DFS data sheet, which has a ton of useful information on there. I use it each and every single week. I got my cheat sheet, my notes, the projections, all that fun stuff, and you can hop into the Discord chat as well and bug me all day if you so choose to do so. So if you're interested, links down below for that, and if not, no pressure at all. But I think that's it for the shameless plug, so without further ado, let's get into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and up top, we got Big Ben at $11,400, and yes, he is a bit pricey, but with the way this slate is, you're definitely going to want to be pretty heavy on the Pittsburgh Steelers rather than the Baltimore Ravens, so you definitely want the guy that has the ball in his hands each and every single play. And he's got great options to get the ball to in Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Juju Smith-Schuster. You can throw in Eric Ebron in there as well. And with James Conner being out, they might just rely on moving the ball through the air even more. So definitely have a lot of interest in Big Ben here. Now the matchup, it is what it is, and the numbers, they are what they are. But the Ravens are missing some guys. They're 10th DVA versus the pass, and they're 14th in points allowed per game to the quarterback position. But the way the slate works out, you definitely want Big Ben here, at least in the flex spot. If you want to captain him, you can do that. I'd probably end up going with a wide receiver like Claypool, Deontay Johnson, maybe even Juju in the captain spot just to pair with Big Ben in the flex spot. But I think both options are fine here, and he's by far the best quarterback to use on this slate. So plenty of interest there. I know he's super expensive, but you have a 10-point higher implied team total, and they're also playing at home, and I'm sure they're playing pretty motivated after getting this game moved back about a week now. I know they're not very happy about that at all, so definitely like Big Ben here. Now, the more interesting play here is RG3, $8,400. The price is nice, so it's not that hard to fit him in, and we do have to play a Baltimore Ravens, so if you want to do a Pittsburgh Steelers stack and run that back with a guy like RG3, if you expect them to be playing from behind, which they should be, you should at least be throwing the ball quite a bit, and he's got some rushing upside as well. So I do think he's a pretty interesting play, and when you can get a quarterback below $9,000 on a showdown slate, I'll always have some interest, but man, this 15-point implied team total is just, it is ugly. They're missing all their tight ends. They have Willie Snead out, and they're getting their running backs back, so they might just try to ground and pound versus the Steelers, although it's a tough matchup versus the Steelers. It's a tough matchup through the air as well. They're second TV versus the pass and allowing the second fewest points per game to the position, but if RG3 could get us 15-some points, that's not terrible at 8,400. At least he's going to have the ball in his hand every single play, so I do think he's an interesting play. He's not an absolute must, but at $8,400, it might fit in your lineup pretty nice, so I don't mind going with RG3 on this slate. Then moving on to the running back position, we did get some news from the Baltimore Ravens that's going to work in their favor, as they are expected to get J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram back, which is good for the Ravens, but for fantasy purposes, it definitely muddies the waters a bit because this is going to be a crowded backfield. It was originally going to be concentrated for Gus Edwards. Now it's wide open to Dobbins, Edwards, and Mark Ingram, and throughout the season, this has certainly not been a backfield you have wanted to target, and also Lamar Jackson is always stealing carries as well, but since he is out, this could help the running backs out a little bit to at least make them a little bit more valuable for fantasy purposes. But before we get into them, let's talk about the Steelers backfield first, because James Conner is all the way up top at $9,200, and he is going to be out for this game, which means Benny Snell is going to slide right in here, and also Jalen Samuels is going to be out as well. So pretty much the backfield is Anthony McFarland and Benny Snell. Benny Snell should be getting the guy getting the majority of the carries on the ground, while Anthony McFarland will more than likely be like the third down change of pace guy, and he should be involved in the passing game a little bit. So at $2,600, he is certainly interesting there. But Benny Snell, pretty expensive. Like I said, he's going to lead the backfield in carries, but that is not a fun price tag to pay for Benny Snell. He's barely off of James Conner, and I don't typically love playing James Conner either, so you get a slight discount there. But man, that's a big price point. You're not getting any favors there from DraftKings, so I don't really think he's an absolute must-play here, but them being 10-point favorites at home, that does set up well for the home running back, the guy that's going to typically get a lot of carries on the ground, which would be Benny Snell, but you are paying a premium for him. Now, the matchup versus the Ravens, they're third DVA versus the run this season, but they are 13th in points per game given up, so 23 DraftKings points per game, 90 rushing yards, and 0.4 rushing touchdowns per game, which isn't terrible. But they're going to be without some defenders for guys that are on the list. So if Benny Snell finds the end zone, you'll probably be happy with his production if he gets close to 100 rushing yards. But if he does not find the end zone, you're probably wishing you didn't pay down that $9,000 for Benny Snell. Now, getting into the Ravens running backs, we got Dobbins, Edwards, and Mark Ingram. Now, J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram, they're just now going to get activated like today, or tomorrow, whenever you're watching this video. But if I had to pick one of these guys, and this is a backfield you can certainly stay away from. They are 10-point dogs on the road, and they only have a 15.75 implied team total. But if you had to pick one, J.K. Dobbins is the best running back in that trio, or of all the running backs there. So I would side with him. I know he's the most expensive, but he's at least involved in the passing game a little bit. We'll see how RG3 does with the running backs, but Dobbins would be my preferred target there, with Mark Ingram being second, then Gus Edwards being third. But it is an overall pretty tricky situation and not one I'm really looking forward to using, especially with them being 10-point dogs. Plus, those are pretty good versus the run, 6 DVA versus that, and they're allowing the second fewest points per game to the position, and the Ravens running backs don't typically get too involved in the passing game either, so I feel like all these guys have low upside in a three-headed committee. Anthony McFarland, I already talked about him a little bit, but he's only $2,600, which is a $6,000 discount, and I fully expect Benny Snell to outsnap, outtouch, and probably outscore Anthony McFarland, but that's all fine because there's a massive price tag difference there. If Anthony McFarland can get in there, get a few carries, get a couple of catches, and if he somehow manages to find the end zone, you'll definitely be way happier playing McFarland over Benny Snell. But at $2,600, I don't think he's the worst value play on this slate by any means, and I'd say there's a decent chance he could be better on a point per dollar basis than Benny Snell, so I do have interest in both of those guys. I would say I like McFarland just a little bit more just because of the price point, but both are certainly viable. And after Anthony McFarland, you really can't use any of these guys. Hill, Ricard, Watt, I mean, you just can't use these guys. So I think that's pretty much it for the running backs. We'll move on to the wide receiver position, and we started off with the three-headed monster at the Pittsburgh wide receiver position, which is Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster, all very talented wide receivers. And all three of these guys have had plenty of value for fantasy purposes all season long, especially the guy up top, Deontay Johnson, at $10,800. He has been great for DFS this year when he's not getting hurt and leaving the game early, because he tends to be a bit underpriced and he tends to ball out each and every single time. He gives me some Antonio Brown vibes sometimes. Big Ben loves getting the football, and the guy looks like a pretty good wide receiver. Now, unfortunately for us on this slate, he's definitely priced at a premium, but it's about time Draftkings is finally getting him some respect because he tends to be way too cheap on these main slates. But $10,800, you're not getting any favors there, but he's obviously the preferred option to pair with Big Ben. He's the guy that Big Ben loves getting him the ball. I mean, if you're looking at his numbers this season, it's a bit skewed because it counts games where he gets hurt early on and leaves, and that just kills his stats. But if you take those games out of the equation, we're looking at about a 30% target share, about 10 targets per game, and all these numbers would be a little bit higher. So Deontay Johnson, he's having a great season. The matchup versus Baltimore, I wouldn't say it's the greatest in the world. They're allowing the 6th fewest points per game to the position in their 10th DVA, but the way Deontay Johnson's been playing this season, he's actually averaging the most targets per out ran in this offense. Not the most fantasy points per out ran. Chase Claypool is kind of that big play guy where you can certainly break a slate. And I have interest in all three of these guys, but the most safe one here is Deontay Johnson. If you can afford him, he's the guy I want to pair with Big Ben, but all three of these guys are viable. If you can fit in all three, I would love that. It's just I'm not sure if it's actually going to be doable because they're all pretty expensive, as is Big Ben. But if you had to pick two, I would say Deontay and Chase Claypool is the way I want to go. Juju Smith-Schuster would be the third guy looking in, and they're kind of priced how I like them, but I'd be looking to target all three across all of my lineups. Then getting into the Ravens wide receivers, which are certainly not as fun to talk about, as we have Marquise Brown, Willie Snead's not going to be playing in this game. Des Bryant throwing it back to 2015. Devin Duvernay. James Washington, he's on the Steelers, but definitely falls off a cliff here after the big three, and it's certainly priced like that as well. And to be honest, we've never really wanted to use these wide receivers for fantasy purposes all season long. They just have very limited upside. Now with Lamar Jackson being out, I'm not sure why we'd want to target them. I can't imagine RG3 is much of an upgrade. More than likely, he's going to be a bit of a downgrade here. And this is a team that likes to run the football, so they have very limited upside. They only have a team total of 15 this week. I can't expect a lot of points to be scored. Now, they are 10-point dogs, which could help them game flow-wise, but even then, they're facing a pretty tough Pittsburgh defense. Their second DVA versus the pass. Now, when it comes to the wide receivers, though, they're kind of mid-pack. They're allowing the 16th most points per game, which is exactly right in the middle. So maybe it's a little bit softer there, but even then, Marquise Brown, he's been super inconsistent this season, although he's always got upside in the air yards department. He could always hit a big play. He's gone 8 out of 15.3 this season, and near 40% market share of the team's air yards. And then with Willie Snead being out for this game, it's obviously going to consolidate the targets a little bit more. So you got to take about a 15% target share guy out of the equation, so that's going to bump up targets to Marquise Brown. Des Bryant, Devin Duvernay should step in as the wide receiver 3, Miles Boykin as the wide receiver 4, maybe James Proche gets involved a little bit. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce his name, although I don't really think he's going to be a factor in this game. But it's a bit of an ugly situation here, but obviously Marquise Brown's the wide receiver 1 here, and I'd say he's got the most upside. But for the price tag, I do like Devin Duvernay quite a bit at $3,200. I feel like there's at least a little bit of upside there. He's already got around a 10% target share on the season, and if you take out Willie Snead, that should probably bump up around 10%, if not a little bit more. So for the price point, I definitely have some interest in there. Miles Boykin, he's been quite disappointing, but at the very least, he's cheap. So if you need some value, I don't hate it. You also have some return upside there as well. But as for the Steelers' secondary options outside of the big 3 there, James Washington should get a couple of targets. On the season, he's averaging about 3.5 targets per game with a 9% target share. Then you have Ray McCloud. He's getting around 2 targets per game. So guys, not guys you can really count on for the most part. And if you're going to go cheap at wide receiver, you might just want to take one of the cheaper Ravens guys just because Willie Snead is out, and they're 10-point dogs. So, but wide receiver's not that great outside of Deontay Johnson, Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster. That is for sure. And then moving on to the tight end position, which is certainly an ugly one here for the Baltimore Ravens, as they're going to be without their top tight end, Mark Andrews, who's one of the better tight ends in football. And he's also a type 1 diabetic, so I'm wishing him the best as he's a bit more vulnerable than others. But he's leaving behind around a 25% target share and a 25% market share of the team's air yards. And I probably should have mentioned that when I was talking about the Ravens wide receivers. That's just going to open up some more targets as well, as I really don't think they're going to replace Mark Andrews' 22% target share with the backup tight ends that they're going to be throwing out there. And Nick Boyle's out as well, as he's on the IR. So as of right now, their tight end situation is Eric Tomlinson, Luke Wilson, and Sean Culkin. And Luke Wilson's not even in the player pool for some reason, as he's actually even played for the Ravens so far this year. So I'm not really sure why he didn't make it. But as of right now on Draftkings, we have Eric Tomlinson here. And if he happens to get some playing time at $200, hey, it's a fine punt play. Maybe he finds himself into the end zone. Maybe he catches a pass. It's really hard to project these Ravens tight ends as of right now. I really wish Luke Wilson was in the player pool, but apparently he's questionable with an illness as well. So it's an absolute mess for the Ravens tight ends. But if Eric Tomlinson happens to get information that he's going to get some playing time, $200, he's technically the only tight end for the Ravens that is viable on this entire slate. So, hey, at $200, he'll certainly get some playing times. And Andrews and Boyle combined, they have around a 30% target share this season. So if you wipe that out, there's definitely some targets to be had here, so I wouldn't mind going with Tomlinson, and outside of that, you can't play any of the other cheap tight ends. And then with that being said, we'll move on to the defenses, which the Steelers' defense is certainly in play, but the problem is they're about $8,000, and at that point, I would just try to find the money to get it like RG3 in there, or someone else around that price point, because I don't like paying $8,000 for a defense because their upside is limited. But the thing is, they are a 10-point favorite at home against a team that is dealing with a ton of guys out, and they have a 15.75 implied team total against them. So I guess if there's any time to use a near $8,000 defense, I guess now's the time. It's one of the best defenses in football, so I don't hate the idea of going there. And I guess it would also make sense in my lineups as well, as I don't really plan on having a ton of Ravens, so I guess correlation-wise, it could work out, but that's a premium to pay for a defense. As for the Ravens, no thank you here. The Steelers, for the most part, have most of their guys playing besides James Conner. I could see Big Ben ripping them apart with Chase Claypool. I almost said James Claypool. Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Deontay Johnson. So I don't really have much interest in the Ravens defense, especially on the road in Pittsburgh, and with all the injuries/illnesses that they are dealing with. And as for the kickers, they are what they are. If they hit their field goals, they hit their field goals, and they become decent value plays. If I had to pick one, I would obviously say Boswell, just because there should be plenty more scoring opportunities for the Pittsburgh Steelers here over Justin Tucker. Now, Justin Tucker is one of the best kickers in football, but when you have a team total of 15.75, it usually means that Vegas thinks you're not going to get in too many scoring. You're not going to be in scoring position too often. So the upside for field goal attempts is probably going to be limited for Justin Tucker. But if you think the Ravens move the ball at least a little bit, then their drive stall out, which can certainly happen versus the Steelers, it could turn into a field goal fest, and maybe those 15 points all come from Justin Tucker field goals. And if that's the case, yeah, you're definitely going to want him on your roster. But for the most part, good luck projecting kickers. If I had to pick one, though, I'll take Boswell just because of the $200 difference, and he should have had plenty of more scoring opportunities. But with that being said, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Follow me on social media if you want to. Chris Pennell 16 on Twitter, cpenn16 over on IG. And like I said earlier, if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, feel free to do that as well. Link is down below for that. And yeah, this is going to be quite the interesting game. It could be pretty ugly, so just be ready. But I'm just kind of excited to watch football on a Wednesday night. I think that's going to be pretty interesting and fun to do. So see you guys in the next one. And if you want to check out the first look video, I did post that earlier today.